Have you ever heard of Rockstar Games? You know, they aren't known for that much. Like Bully, LA Noir, Red Dead Redemption. Yeah, not that much. Oh, yeah, not to forget.
GTA motherfucker!
Oh, yeah, and Grand Theft fucking Auto. Rockstar definitely has managed to show that they know how to make games that last, especially with the GTA franchise being their main cash cow. I mean, for fuck's sake, GTA 5 is still $40 on Steam, despite being almost 10 years old. But one big thing that Rockstar seems to have a knack for is making games that are controversial. The main games that first come to mind are Bully and the GTA franchise, respectively, both being known and harshly criticized for their violence by pussy game journalists and parents everywhere, especially when they first came out. However, there is a smaller game that the company made that isn't as well known or popular as their other franchises. This game managed to take that controversial dial and cranked it up to 11. This game that lives in Rockstar's fucked up basement is Manhunt. Manhunt was released November 18th, 2003, and shocked the unready world for being one of the most gruesome settings for a video game. You play as James Earl Cash, a death row inmate seemingly being put to death for his crimes, only to discover that a mysterious man has bribed doctors instead to sedate you and keep you alive. The reason behind the mysterious man, later known as Starkweather, doing this is so that James Earl Cash can be the new star of his snuff films. A snuff film is something that unfortunately does happen in the real world. A snuff film is a film that shows an actual death or suicide of another human being on camera. There sadly is a big market for this online, and you can often find them pretty easily if you're looking for them. However, I very much urge you not to go looking for these films because they can at times be extremely traumatizing to watch. And I'm not just spewing bullshit, I'm talking from personal experience here. I've seen a lot of gross shit online, but something about watching an actual death is just too much. So I'm not going to list any of the sites on here where you can find these because I don't want to give these sick psychos any more attention than they're already getting. So yeah, already the game is lining itself up to be pretty violent with just its subject matter and plot alone. But the gameplay of Manhunt only adds to this disturbing plot more and more. The very first level teaches you that holding down mouse 1 will bring an indicator above an enemy's head, and when it turns yellow, you can kill them in pretty horrendous ways. However, if you hold it down longer, the indicator will turn red and give you an even more brutal kill. One thing I found very intriguing right off the bat is that the player shouldn't want to perform these brutal kills if you're a normal fucking person. But something about that promise for a bigger score at the end of the level just seriously brought it out of me. Some of these kills wouldn't exactly shock modern audiences, especially with games like Doom and its brutal glory kills, but it's the sound design that really makes Manhunt's kills that much more gut-wrenching, even more so coupled with the fact that it's performed on a human being rather than some faceless demon. Another more niche part of this game's sharp-as-a-knife atmosphere is the soundtrack. Not really any banger tracks to put on for the boys, but definitely fitting for the game's stealthy gameplay. A lot of the time in Manhunt, you'll be hiding and luring people over to you just so you can massacre them. And the soundtrack of this game perfectly fits with that setting. These tracks, while you're not being caught, are very low and very quiet. Like I said before, very fitting for while you're hiding in the shadows. However, the track will take a sudden turn when you're spotted, giving you this absolutely total panic feeling. Another thing I find done extremely well in this game that isn't done as well in other games of the same-ish nature is the main character. In other games such as Hatred, you're playing as a character who completely glorifies violence. I just don't enjoy massacring innocent people in brutal ways. I can enjoy it in Postal 2 because the game is meant to be goofy and ridiculous, while also never being taken seriously. Manhunt manages to do this in a way where it makes itself very, very violent, while also at the same time having moments that would be goofy in a game like Postal, but when it's done in Manhunt, it just feels gross and icky. And that feeling works massively in this game's favor. James Earl Cash is not the kind of person to go spouting off one-liners and being totally ridiculous like in Hatred or Postal. Him being silent allows the player to have these feelings about what's going on around him instead of going off of how the character's feeling. A big thing that many games do with their main character is have them be a vessel of sorts for the player to connect with and put themselves in. But Rockstar did the opposite of this with James Earl Cash. Because James Earl Cash is never labeled the good guy. I mean, for fuck's sake, you don't get put on death row for just petty crimes. But his past is still left ambiguous, because knowing that he's being put to death is enough for the player to understand you're not supposed to like and connect with this character. However, you as the player still want to help Cash because, well, why the fuck are you playing a video game? Cash still has enough humanizing factors to still be a normal person. He clearly knows the difference between right and wrong, as demonstrated in the level Strapped for Cash, where Cash has to save members of his family who've been kidnapped and hidden around the level.
Run as far away as you can.
However, Cash saving his family is sadly in vain, because at the very end of the next level, this happens.
You must understand, Cash. I could never let them go. Where were your family when you were facing your final moments in the chamber anyway? You've left your old life, your old self. I'm all the family you need now.
Cash saves all of his family members, only for Starkweather to just kill them anyway. Starkweather is one of my favorite video game villains of all time. And not just because he's voiced by Brian Cox, who does an absolutely amazing job. Starkweather is characterized from the beginning as just a downright disgusting human being. Him being the one to bribe the doctors to sedate James Earl Cash instead of putting him to death. All only to force him into starring in snuff films. And also promising him freedom if he does what he says, even though it's revealed later that promise has no weight to begin with. Starkweather has this serious knack for probably being the best character in the game, mostly for the beginning half of the game where you're brutally killing people and he completely praises you for it, even at times audibly pleasuring himself to your killings.
Oh my God! I've had an accident. I'm serious, man. You brought me off.
But there's something that's just so lovable about how horrible he is. It's a situation that I can almost compare to GLaDOS from Portal, where this is the only voice talking directly to me, and, well, I'm just glad it's this one. But it's exactly this moment when you realize this that Rockstar decides to completely take it away from you. Starkweather's promise of freedom turns out to be bullshit, setting up Cash's death to be the big finale of the movie. James Earl Cash manages to avoid that fate because he's a total fucking badass, completely severing you from Starkweather's quote-unquote guidance. From this point on, even more so than before, it's pure survival for Cash, still being forced to kill, but for a completely different reason now. The horror factor of the game becomes extremely amplified when Starkweather's no longer talking to you. When Starkweather would talk to the player, it almost gave you this sense of safety, making you feel like Starkweather's promise was somewhat valid. Even though Starkweather's a disgusting piece of shit, it was still a voice. It was someone talking to you that wasn't trying to kill you. I mentioned before that GLaDOS was the same way, where it's a voice that talks to you and you're glad to just have someone to talk to, even if the conversation is completely one-sided. Another example I can think of is Jigsaw. Instead of him leaving a video telling you what your puzzle is or whatever, you just would wake up in a dark room with no clue what to do. And that's exactly what Starkweather's purpose was. He wasn't meant to be your friend. He was meant to be your direction. And although the stealth parts of this game are completely fantastic, this is also the part of the game where they really start to get carried away with the gunplay. Shooting in Manhunt is never supposed to be your first option. It should only ever be a last resort. Earlier in the game, you're taught to avoid rushing into things and to take things slowly, as head-on combat can be extremely clunky. The unarmed combat is purposefully done this way to encourage the player to use a melee weapon, but the gunplay in this game is just too clunky, and I can't find an excuse for it. However, it doesn't last long until one of the very last levels of the game. Thankfully, the final mission of the game, Deliverance, is easily my favorite mission in the game. Not only because the gameplay in this part goes back to the stealth elements that Manhunt does so well, all the parts of this game that made it so terrifying is completely amplified in this level. That feeling of hiding in the shadows and hunting people is completely turned on you. In this level, you go to confront Starkweather, but you're interrupted by Pigsy, a depraved, unbathed, horrible beast of a man wearing a severed pig's head over his own. He's also armed with a fucking chainsaw. In Deliverance, Cash is forced to hide and sneak up on Pigsy in order to attack him. The game builds up this moment throughout the entire game, and it's just genius. At the beginning of the game, you hunt down people, jumping from the shadows and killing anyone Starkweather wanted you to. Then, towards the midpoint of the game, Starkweather leaves you and you're forced to survive, putting you on equal grounds with every person attacking you. And lastly, in the final part of the game, you've gone from the hunter to being the hunted. When Pigsy chases you, you'll only ever hear his chainsaw ripping up before you see him sprinting at you, which is the scariest fucking thing I've ever experienced. Manhunt is a game that I find extremely fascinating. I know with the context of the game and the brutal executions, it may seem at first that the game does in fact glorify violence. But Manhunt does this very interesting way of disconnecting yourself from Cash and the killings. From the beginning of the game, Cash is never meant to be this character that you connect with. Knowing that he's a death row inmate is more than enough to show that he's not an innocent man. Well then, why would I ever want to carry out these horrible executions? Liam Triforce made a really good point about this in his video.
These are sickening murders. Surely I don't want to watch these, right? Well, no, of course not. Realistic gore is very unpleasant to most people, but Manhunt forces your hand into killing enemies in disturbing ways through the sheer curiosity that also makes us human.
I also mentioned before that this game isn't like Hatred, which is a game where you massacre innocent civilians just because. What separates these games is that there's a point to Manhunt's killings. James Earl Cash doesn't kill because he wants to, he kills because he wants to survive. In Manhunt, you're forced to kill people who are far from innocent, by the way. You don't get a choice, and that's shown to you from the start. Starkweather's promise at the beginning of the game of Cash's freedom is what gives this game a reason to proceed. Then, when everything's turned on you, you suddenly have a new reason to proceed. Hatred has no reason for its violence. Well, other than...
My name is not important. What is important is what I'm going to do. I just fucking hate this world and these human worms feasting on its carcass. My whole life is just cold, bitter hatred. And I always wanted to die violently. This is the time of vengeance, and no life is worth saving. And I will put in the grave as many as I can. It's time for me to kill. And it's time for me to die.
Sweet fucking lord, I think I cut myself just watching that video. In conclusion, I think that Manhunt is a fantastic survival psychological horror game. It's disturbing, yes, but the crazy motherfuckers at Rockstar North set out to do just that, and to test how much people could truly stomach at that point in time. Hell, even now some of the executions in this game are still enough to get me a little uncomfortable. And it's all because of that brilliant sound design, animation, and that sweet, sweet atmosphere. But the fact of the matter is that I think Manhunt should be experienced if you're a fan of very intense horror themes. I want to give a very big shout out to Liam Triforce. I got the idea for this video after watching his, and Manhunt is a game I've known about ever since my dad would kick me and my brother out of his office when he would play it. It's been a game I really wanted to talk about for a while now, and seeing as not a lot of people have talked about it before, I felt like it would make for a semi-interesting video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you go and check out the first episode of my Let's Play of the game, as well as Liam Triforce's video, as it's probably a much better analysis of the horror in this game compared to what I could do. And also don't forget to like the video and subscribe. My name's Vinny14, and this has been the Manhunt video.
Messer